Last Tuesday, January 22nd, Governor Andrew Cuomo signed a bill that passed the Senate and Assembly of New York State. This bill has been praised by many in the mainstream media and in the Democratic Party as being an historic codification at the state level of the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision in 1973 that made the murder of innocent children in the mother's womb a legal practice throughout the United States of America. To be clear, this bill allows for the murder of an unborn child up to the delivery of the child. That is, a fully formed baby that can live outside of its mother's womb can be killed at the mother's request up until the point of birth. And I could go on about how the New York bishop said nothing leading up to this bill being passed, or how the response from bishops and cardinals in New York and its aftermath is overwhelmingly disappointing, but I would be wasting my breath since in recent months the majority of U.S. bishops have proven themselves to be unmoved by the cries of the lay faithful. This week, news outlets went back and forth about a Democratic-sponsored bill in the Virginia state legislature that would have also placed on the state's books the allowance of abortion up to and even during the birth of a child. Thankfully, the bill was never voted out of subcommittee. I can only hope that it never moved to the floor because the elected men and women in Virginia recognize the bill as truly evil. The governor of Virginia also insinuated that if the child is born alive during the abortion procedure, the mother and the doctor would then have to have a decision about what to do next. Simply, we're talking about bills that legalize infanticide. We're talking about a human life that is a human life whether it is inside or outside of its mother's womb. The birth canal does not confer personhood. The birth canal does not make a human person. Instead, a mother and a father make a human when conception occurs. At this moment, a new life begins that has a new DNA that is not its mother's nor its father's. That new life is a unique organism that is not its father nor its mother, and it's a life that will never be repeated. Now, politically, these bills cropping up in states across America is actually a good sign. It means the left is scared. They are scared that America is asserting a pro-life conscience. They are scared that the right case may come to the Supreme Court that will provide an opportunity to overturn the decision in Roe v. Wade. But that day won't be the end of the pro-life movement. With the federal legalization gone, it becomes the decision of the states. And so they're being proactive. And that's where we will take our fight, to the states. The Democratic Party will continue to endorse enshrining abortion protections in state statutes throughout our country because they fear that the nation is turning. And abortion, as enshrined in the federal laws of our land, is soon coming to an end. Groups will continue to fight to keep abortion legal. While their arguments vary, I think Pope Francis has summarized a response very well when he said a few months ago, "How can an action that ends an innocent and defenseless life in its blossoming stage be therapeutic, civilized, or simply humane? I ask you, is it right to do away with a human life in order to solve a problem? It is not right to do away with a human being, however small, in order to solve a problem. It is like hiring a hitman to solve a problem." Our first reading contains a seed of God's design for human life. The prophet Jeremiah says that the word of the Lord came to him. It says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I dedicated you. A prophet to the nations, I appointed you." God declares his own love for human life because each human life is foreseen in his plan of redemption. He infuses the soul in the new child at conception, which gives life and makes that child eternal. In a way, every life is a prophecy to the nations. In his or her way, no matter how small, each child tells of the glories of God and his goodness. Even in the cases of defects, medical issues, illnesses, deformities, every human life, because it is alive, tells something of God's goodness. Some time back, a woman came into my office and said that her doctor advised her to terminate her pregnancy. A euphemism, of course. Her doctor wanted her to choose to kill her child because the ultrasound showed possible birth defects. The mother refused, came right to the church, and I just happened to be in the office. After many tears and many words about trusting in God, and that sometimes these things resolve themselves as the child develops, I was able to calm her down, and we had a plan to go back to the doctors and to stand for life. And so she did. And so she waited. It was difficult for her to trust. Little by little, the issues the doctors reported became less and less severe throughout her pregnancy. While they originally said that the child would be stillborn because of heart and lung defects, a week before birth, the doctors were amazed to say that there might be a chance. Might be. So they went from 0% you must terminate to there could be a chance that your child will survive. And the child was born alive. The parents baptized her. She died 3 hours later. What did I see in all of this? The unconditional love of parents, which revealed the unconditional love of God. They loved her to her birth. They provided her with the sacrament of baptism, which is the love of God. And for her whole life, she was loved completely. All 3 hours. We sorrowfully buried her, but deep down we know that she is rejoicing in heaven. Her life, very short, tells of God's life-giving love. The Lord spoke over Jeremiah and told him that he had a special place in the world as his messenger. But then God immediately tells him that he would suffer. God basically says to him, gird your loins. Men will pursue you, nations will fight against you. But in all of this suffering, God has one commandment: do my will. God says that even though men will rise against you, stand up and tell them all that I have commanded you. I challenge you to find one figure in the Old or the New Testament that does God's will and does not suffer rebuke or hardship. That person cannot be found. Part of human existence, that is, part of these mortal bodies and sinful tendencies, is some sort of suffering and difficulty. But suffering and difficulty doesn't make life not worth living. It makes it worth fighting for. It makes it worth serving one another in reverence to God, who has given us the gift of life to care for. It fortifies us in our fight for the weak, the suffering, the poor, the defenseless. Human life has inherent dignity that is not measured by the condition of our bodies, the contribution that we can make to society, or the capacity to care for oneself. The dignity of human life comes from the God who first loved us into being. And so, my brothers and sisters, in our nation today, it's not enough for the church to teach us that abortion is wrong. It's not enough for us to nod when we hear a pro-life message and shake our heads when we hear a pro-abortion lobby. It is incumbent to imitate Christ, who preaches in his own backyard, in his own home community, and who is rejected. Yes, we may be rejected. We may anger those who oppose us, but the teachings of Christ and the protection of the unborn won't come about by prayer alone. Christ presented the truth by being present as truth in the synagogue. We must do the same by being active in our local pro-life ministries and present at abortion clinics. We must show up and be a peaceful witness of love and a living testimony of the worth of human life. We must stop deluding ourselves that we have to weigh the issues when we vote. There is one issue that takes priority over all the others: the eradication of abortion in our land and the valuing of human life. What is the point of any other issue that will provide security and flourishing to the next generation if we are allowing the next generation to be snuffed out in the womb? Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I dedicated you. A prophet to the nations, I appointed you. The Lord has given us all one thing in common: life. So we must then go out and be prophets for life in our backyard for those who cannot speak for themselves. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.